The next thing I feel is this overwhelming sense of unconditional love surround me. I had never felt anything like that, ever.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Cryptic Conversations. I'm your host, Tunes from the Crypt, and we have another very special episode in store for you today. Today's guest is a woman named Elizabeth Freed, also known as the San Marcos Medium. She is a medium by choice, not by birth, based in San Marcos, California. After a 40-year career as an executive coach, management consultant, and author, she retired and pursued mediumship, training extensively to hone her skills. Her readings connect clients with departed loved ones and pets, delivering healing and empowering messages. She donates all proceeds from her readings to the Honor Foundation, where she also volunteers as a pro bono coach for special operations military personnel transitioning to civilian life. Her spiritual journey began with an out-of-body experience in her 20s and deepened after personal losses, leading her to embrace mediumship later in life. And it is with great pleasure to have her today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. So nice to be here. Glad you're feeling better. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again. So as I like to ask all my guests, talk to me about your early life. Where did you grow up and go to school? And what was your family like?
Well, it's not that interesting, actually. It's pretty boring. I grew up in a loving family, and I grew up in Ohio, and we were lower middle class people. And my father came here from Vienna. My mother's parents came from Czechoslovakia, and she was the only one born here. We lived in a 2-bedroom home with upstairs were my aunt and uncle and their 2 children. And we lived with my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, and me, as well as my grandparents in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home. We were downstairs.
Wow.
But strangely, I never felt crowded, just felt very loved, and I appreciated that. So I grew up in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and then I moved to Lyndhurst. I went to Ohio State University, much to the dissatisfaction of my parents. They wanted me to get married, and they felt that this was the time because I'm 77 years old. So back then, women maybe could be a teacher or a nurse, and they didn't want me to leave to go to school, and I fought that, and I left Cleveland, Ohio, and went to Columbus, Ohio, and worked 3 jobs to get my degree. I was a live-in nanny, I was a secretary, and I did something else, anything to get through. And then I taught school for a while, and I taught in a detention center for juvenile delinquents, and that was challenging. And I tended to teach in hard to reach, hard to teach school systems, and didn't like that. Then went on, got a master's, and got a fellowship to do that, and then a fellowship and got my doctorate degree. Then I worked in a corporation after that. So that's my basic history.
I love it. Okay. So I'd like to ask you, growing up, was religion or spirituality a part of your life?
Well, I would say spirituality, no. Religion was forced upon me. I was never into it at all. I mean, the way I grew up, it was, in my view, yes, I grew up Jewish, but I would say it was more a way of life. I just never liked going to the synagogue. I never liked going to religious school. I just didn't want to. I didn't like it. I used to cut out, go to the shopping center. That was for kids.
All right. Okay. And so can you describe the out-of-body experience that you had in your 20s? Talk to us about that.
I was expecting my fiance to come and visit, and I needed to get to sleep, but my phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing, waking me up. And in those days, there was no answer machine. So you had to answer your phone or it continued to ring. So every time I would start to drift off to bed, my phone would start ringing again. And the last person to call me was my friend Vernon. And he said, "Oh, I want to come over. I got to talk to you." And I said, "You can't. David's coming in. I need to get to sleep. I don't have time. I'm so sorry, but I can't." And So now I'm like lying there, I'm exhausted, but I can't fall asleep. So I am trying to figure out what to do next. And I'm thinking my yoga teacher talked about putting yourself in an alpha state. So I said, all right, well, let me see what that's about. So I'm lying in bed and I'm trying to breathe and put myself in this alpha state. And to me, it feels like a marijuana rush. So I just said, okay, so this is what it is. All right, fine. No, okay, so now I'm bored with this. What's next? And so I'm lying there, and I had been reading this book, Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation, and they talked about this universal mind. And, oh, maybe I could tune into the universal mind. And so I'm concentrating on tuning into the universal mind. And all of a sudden, I pick up two people talking like on a Citizens Band radio, and then a radio station. And these two guys in New York are doing a review of a play. And I'm going, holy smokes, this is crazy. I'm tuning this radio off. Forget about it. So now I'm sitting there, twiddling my thumbs, still can't fall asleep. So I said, oh, I wonder if I could just imagine energy. Because I had read about being in two places at once. I said, I wonder if I could have energy coming out of my mind. And I'm concentrating in between my eyes. I don't know, this is the third eye. I don't know, this is the Ajna. I'm just concentrating on energy leaving my body. And the next thing I know, I am going through this gray tunnel with wind sound in my ear, like in the old days when Superman was flying through the air. This really, and I went, holy smokes, I have no idea where I'm going. What if I can't get back? And brought myself back in my body. And I'm kind of like lying there looking around, and I'm afraid to touch myself because I'm feeling really hot. And I thought, what was that? And then I thought, I wonder if I could do that again. So I tried it again. And this time my bed started shaking, the whole room started shaking, and then I was gone again. And I said, oh, you fool. You didn't have a plan. You didn't know where you're going. What if you can't get back? And bang, I brought myself back again. And I just was astounded. I thought, what was that? So I got up, 2:45 a.m. I said, I'm documenting every single thing that happened to me, because if I don't write this down right now, then I'm not going to believe it really happened. So I wrote it all down. Then my fiance came in, he visited. I was afraid to fall asleep. I was afraid I'd jump out of my body. I didn't know what to do. And then he went back. So then my friend Vernon calls me. And I said, oh, Vernon, you're not going to believe what happened to me. He said, you're not going to believe what happened to me. I said, the night that we talked, he said, yes. Now, I have to say, Vernon is Black. And he said, I wanted to talk to you, and I had been drinking, but I wasn't drunk. He said, I walked into the farmhouse. He lived in some hippie farmhouse back then. And he said, I walked into the farmhouse, and as I walked in, this wind came rushing through the farmhouse, caused the pictures on the wall to spin. The whole house shook. He said, I'm a Black man, but I turned white in that moment. He said, it was very scary. I said, what time did this happen? He said, around 2:45 a.m. I said, Vernon, I think that was me coming through. And I think what happened was I was so worried about him, because I don't usually let a friend down when they're in need, but I couldn't on that. And I think it was me checking in on him, and that was what happened. So that was the very first experience I had. And I told every living, breathing soul about it. And then I moved to Minnesota for a while to be with my fiance at the time. These women that I had told the story to said, there is a man that's coming to the University of Minnesota to talk about astral projection and lucid dreaming. And you might be interested. I said, you bet I am. So I went. Now, this man taught astral projection by using, through your dreams, once you're asleep, you recognize that you're dreaming. And at that point, you can control your dreams and go into the astral world. So I listened to his lecture, but he was also offering consultations. And I really needed to know, was this a legitimate out-of-body experience, or really was I making this up in my mind? And so I went to see him. He was a totally weird guy. I mean, he was from England, I go to his hotel room, knock on the door. I have my check in my hand, and I'm 20 something years old. And this guy greets me in his slippers and a robe and pajamas. And I'm thinking, oh, gee, me, what did I get? And then I thought, oh, be bold. You're fine. Just go in there. You're going to pay him to do this. He's just eccentric. So I tell him what happened. I said, I need to know, was this legitimate? He said, it was legitimate. And don't you ever do that again. I said, what do you mean? He said, you did it when you were wide awake. Only the most trained yogis can do that when they are wide awake, totally conscious. It isn't safe for you. That if you were just relaxing, if you repeatedly did this, and then one day you would be relaxing, your astral body could leave, and leaving you as an open vehicle for any other traveling astral body. They could come into your body, and then you would appear schizophrenic. Well, at that very year that this happened, the movie The Exorcist had just come out. And I said, all right, that's it for me. I'm done. I said, I'm not doing that. Now, I have come to know that that's not necessarily true, the advice that he gave me, but he scared the wits out of me. So for years, I did nothing about it. But that was my experience. And I just decided to leave it lay. And the other thing is, my whole purpose in life is to be of service. And I really wasn't sure as to how flying around in the astral realm was being of service to anyone. So I said, why go through this, put myself through it? So I didn't. And so I put it to rest until my 40s.
Wow. Okay. So it sounded like that out-of-body experience kind of set you on the path, right? And then I was reading up on your bio. So it said you went through a series of personal losses that kind of further set you on the path. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I had 3 miscarriages, and it was sad, but I got over it. I just took it in stride. It wasn't meant to be. That's what it was. And one day I was sitting in my office talking on the phone. I was trying to set up a consulting engagement with GE Aircraft Engine. Very corporate, very left brain. That's me. Okay. And I'm talking to her and I'm saying, yes, I think 2:00 sounds like that. So let me check my calendar. And then I'm noticing that the room is suddenly taking on a golden glow. But I'm on the phone and I'm thinking, oh, maybe the sun's just coming in through the window differently than I've ever noticed before. And I'm still engaged in this conversation. The next thing I feel is this overwhelming sense of unconditional love surround me. I had never felt anything like that, ever. And I said, wow, what is this? And I thought, well, I thought I heard something, so I thought maybe my husband had stepped into the room. Now, he loved me, but not this kind of love. It was different. But then I felt this reassuring squeeze on my shoulder, and I thought, oh, I bet it's him. So I go to wheel around to say, look, I'm on the telephone with a client. And I was a little annoyed that he would walk into me and interrupt me. So I go to wheel around, and there was nothing there. And I went, woo! And the lady on the phone said to me, are you okay? I said, yes, I'm fine. And we continued our conversation. I booked the appointment. And then I noticed the light got back to normal and this feeling of love dissipated. And I just sat back in my chair and I said, what was that? And I'm thinking, was this what they call a religious experience? Because usually you think of religious experience, someone's on their knees, they're praying to God, they feel this. No, I'm in the middle of a business call, so it's crazy. So, and I have to tell you that maybe a week or two prior to this, a friend of mine was a bona fide psychic. She had been followed by Johns Hopkins from the time she was a little girl. And she was now training other people. She said to me, you know, my students are telling me they feel an energy pull in our training session. You're the most practical person in the world. You'll tell me whether you really feel this or not. So I said, okay. So I came down to her training center. And one of her acolytes or trainees said to me, I'm going to do a protection prayer around you before you do this. So I want you to pray to whoever you believe in or higher source or whatever for protection before I do this. So I said, I don't really pray. That's not my deal. So I said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. So I said, okay, God, I'm very irreverent, right? Again, bearing this in mind, this was, okay, God, show me what's real and show me what's bullshit. Then she does her thing. Then my friend comes, she puts her hands over mine. She says, do you feel any kind of pull? I said, I don't feel anything. She puts her hands under mine. Do you feel any kind of pull? I said, nothing. She said, okay, I trust you. That's how you feel. Fine. Thank you for coming in. That was that. So, a couple weeks later, now I have this experience, and I call up a friend of mine who I know to be a born-again Christian. So I said to her, hey, Candace, have you ever had a religious experience? And she said, yes. I said, I want to share with you what happened to me, and you can tell me whether you think this is considered a religious experience. So I tell her, and she said to me, did you pray recently? I said, I don't pray. And I go, wait a minute. I said, actually, I did. And I told her the story I just told you. And her response was, well, I guess you were shown what is real. And then I knew that it was a real experience. And I yearned to feel that sense of love again. But I was maybe 38, 40, something like that. And now I'm 77, never felt it again until maybe 6 or 7 months ago, when I was doing my mediumship, and an angel came through who was my mediumship angel. And she looked upon me and made me feel that same sense of you are loved unconditionally. And it's a beautiful, beautiful feeling. So that's the really history behind it.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like, so that first experience that you had, you were an executive coach at the time?
The first, when I had the out-of-body experience?
No, in your 30s?
Oh, in my 30s, yes.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask you, so like, what was the transition like, from an executive coach to now later pursuing acting and mediumship? I feel like these are like completely opposite of each other. So what has that transition been like?
Well, it's been very much a challenge. I'm always reinventing myself because I get bored. All right. So I started out teaching. Then I was a compensation consultant where I designed wage and salary plans. Then I did executive coaching for the last 20 of those years. Okay. So as I was approaching my 70s, I said, I was maybe 68 or something like that. I said, you know what? I need to plan my retirement. I have to decide what it is I wanted to do. I wanted to travel. I wanted to be of service. Hence, I got involved with the Honor Foundation and doing pro bono coaching for them. I wanted to get to explore my creative or metaphysical side and a variety of things. There were 5 things I wanted to do. Maybe serve on a corporate board. I had done volunteer work, but I wanted to do a corporate board. So I said, okay, if I'm going to explore my creative side, let's look at that. So I said, I'm going to take tap dancing. I was horrible at it. I mean, it's like if you can imagine a hippopotamus trying to do tap dancing, that was me. As an adult, trying to learn how to tap dance when people who do it as a kid, it's nothing. But as an adult, so I failed it. Tried a little bit of drawing and artwork. And so I tried a little bit of that. And you know what? I was okay at that. But the thing is, it's work. If you're going to get good at it, you got to work. And it wasn't giving me pleasure. So I said, hey, at this age, if it's not giving me pleasure, I'm not doing it. So then I thought, you know what? I think it would be beneficial if I started putting myself out there to represent the actively aging senior, to say, hey, you don't have to color your hair. You can still look good with silver hair. And so I decided I wanted to do print work and commercials. So I got into doing, I knew nothing about this, nothing. So I thought, okay, it's a learning experience. And I wound up volunteering to do films for students and getting lead roles. Well, I wasn't expecting this. The problem is there were a lot of lines. And as I have gotten older, remembering lines becomes much more challenging. And so I would get so stressed because I thought, oh my God, if I screw up, this poor kid's grade is going to be dependent on how well I do. I don't want that responsibility. So I said, forget about the acting piece of it. Why don't you just focus on print work and commercials? You might have a line or two in commercial that I can handle, but 25, 30 lines, forget it. I don't want to do it. So I did that for a while. And that was interesting because I learned about lighting and sound and editing and all the stuff associated with film. Just a lot of interesting things I knew nothing about, and gained a tremendous respect for actors. It's very hard to take on a character's role and do it and remember the lines and know what your blocking is. It really is a skill. So then I said, okay. I had, in the interim, over the past 10 years, taken courses from the Monroe Institute, which says essentially you're more than your physical body. And I took a number of courses, but again, never really pursued anything I learned because I was busy running my business. But I just wanted to keep my finger in the pot. All right. So then one day I saw this advertisement through the Monroe Institute for a course that was not part of their normal curriculum that said Mediumship Toolkit. And I said, I wonder what that's about. Don't you have to be born with that gift? I'm not psychic. I'm not medium. I don't know how to do that. I'm not Teresa Caputo or Jonathan Edwards or any of these people. And it said, no, you don't need to. You can learn this. Well, I took the course. It was a week-long retreat, and I was fascinated. I was a little bit okay, maybe 20% accurate, if that, but I was intrigued by it. And I said, well, I think I'd like to do this because I see how it could benefit someone, but I'm not going to do it being 20% accurate. I got to get good at this. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to treat it like any other profession that I pursue. I'm going to get good at it. So I embarked upon a journey of taking what would be equivalent to an executive MBA in mediumship, and took every course, took a 10-week course, took an 8-week course, took another 7-week course, went on a cruise, took a 14-hour workshop, took circles, did practice. And really what it is about mediumship, anybody can be a medium. It just takes education, meditation, and practice. And so I have had the benefit of being involved with an organization called VerySoul, VerySoul.com. That enabled me to practice with other mediums and get good fast. So now I would say my accuracy is between 70 and 100%. And the process that I go through is to connect with spirit. And then I typically come up with some kind of random image or something, a word that comes up. And then I'm what is known as an evidence-based medium. So in other words, I just don't say, oh, I have someone here, I have a message. I have to make sure that whoever I have, you can validate for me. So I will give you I will say to you, okay, I have a grandfatherly figure here. It appears as though he passed after the age of 70. He's tall. He has rugged looking face. He's kind of got a gruff personality. And I'll give you 5 to 7 pieces. And then I'll come back and I'll ask you, all right, would you understand a grandfatherly figure who passed between after the age of 70? They have to answer me like this. Yes, no, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't remember. Possibly. They can't give me any more information than that because it's my job to connect appropriately with spirit. So once we go through, and it's always okay for them to say, no, I don't know. So I go back and I ask for more. Once they're sure about who I connected with, then I will give them a memory that only the two of them share. And then once they validate that for me, then I will give them a message from that spirit, and that will conclude the reading. And that's how it kind of works. So your initial question was, how did I make that transition? Well, it was an evolution. And I started out by going on LinkedIn and writing an article. And I wrote an article that says, like Shirley MacLaine, I'm going out on a limb. And I tell people how I arrived at what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. And let me tell you, the reactions are very mixed. There are people who say, oh, Elizabeth, you're constantly pushing yourself into areas. You just really inspire me. To eye roll effect, to the point of somebody saying, I think you're an award-winning executive coach, and now you list yourself as medium. You're doing great damage to the coaching profession in terms of credibility. And I just, my response to that is, boy, you give me a heck of a lot of credit that one person is damaging the coaching industry. That's crap. I don't
Yeah.
do that. But obviously it bothers you, and it could be whatever your belief system is. Believe in this. That's your
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that
I really enjoy that concept of reinventing yourself. I've always been a person where I was like, man, the thought of like doing one career for my whole life was terrifying to me. That's why in college, like I never knew what I wanted to do and all that. And so I got a degree in marketing. So I could do marketing. I could, one day write a book. I could do a podcast, the DJing. I like to do things. It sounds like that's how you are as well. You like to try different things. And I'm also always saying that, age is just a number, right? So you have a very youthful energy to you, and I love it. And I even saw a video of you playing pickleball, and I was like, oh, she's pretty good at pickleball too.
I love pickleball. I just love pickleball. I love the people too. It's really great. It's fun. I was a tennis player.
Ah,
I played tennis with a guy, singles tennis with a guy who was 20 years younger than me, up until about 12 years ago, and then
oh, okay,
it's just too hard now to be able
yeah,
to do that. But and he would beat me, but I made him earn it. That's you have to do that to make it fun. So, but you're going to get people have a variety of different responses. If I tell people that I'm a medium, I sometimes will get the eye roll kind of thing, like
yeah,
or you get this kind of condescending smile from someone like, like they're being polite. They don't want to say, I think,
yeah, yeah,
but, I don't really care what they think.
yeah. Who cares?
To the person that I'm helping, when someone has lost someone that's dear to them and they need closure and they need help, that is what I'm there for, to help them connect with that departed loved one. And not everybody is, and then there are people that go, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
this kind of thing, you're the devil and whatever. Well, that's their issue. I
yeah,
know that that's not true. And I'm also very much into quantum physics, which talks about the field and how everything is really connected. And,
yep.
are we really living in a virtual reality? And do we have on our own Oculus what we're seeing right now? Is that if we took that off and put on another one, would be living in another world? It's mind-boggling to me. The whole thing's mind-boggling. But I know it's real because when I do a reading, I use what is known as a variety of clairs. That's clairvoyance. I see things not in front of me, not objectively, but in my mind. I hear things. I hear words. I hear sentences, sometimes in my own voice, but sometimes in the voice of the spirit that's talking to me. I feel things. I can get the shivers. I can get a pain. I can get an ache. I can get a sense of fear. That can happen. And then and that is clairsentience. Hearing things is clairaudience. And then there's claircognizance. That's just kind of a knowing. You just know certain things. And that happens. Occasionally, on rare occasions, I will smell or I'll get a taste in my mouth, like salty or sweet or something like that. But that's rare for me. That doesn't happen very often.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, I was looking at my notes and you mentioned, how much effort and practice goes into connecting to spirit. So talk to us about your routine and your daily practices you take to hone in on this skill set.
Well, I have to meditate every day. Meditating clears your mind. So I know the difference between when I'm getting messages and when I'm just getting my own mind just doing whatever. So you have to meditate. I connect with it, and like I will meditate and I'll clear out my chakras. I don't know, do you know what chakras are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I will clear out my chakras, or I'll ignite my chakras so that I'm ready to receive. I will ask my guides or spirit, what is it that I need to know right now? And what advice do you have for me so that I could be the best medium that I can be? I always ask that question. They give me a message. So I do that as part of my routine. Also, through this platform of Very Soul, I have the opportunity to practice with other mediums to keep myself. It's like a muscle. You have to continue to use it or you lose it. It's just, that's the way it works. And so you practice with other mediums. And then, of course, I give my reading. So I have to stay on top of my game. I mean, that's basically it.
Yeah, I love that. So, can you share a reading where you uncovered details you couldn't have known
Sure.
without spirit? A couple of your favorite ones?
Yeah, I have some favorite ones. I'll give you two or three. I'm going to start with a simple one. When I was doing a practice reading with Very Soul, it allows me to connect with mediums all over the world. I've talked to mediums in London, New Zealand, Australia, Spain, everywhere. And was talking to this woman in London, and I had connected with her uncle or grandfather, I don't remember. And I was giving her a message, and I said, he's doing this thing where he's putting his hands to his mouth, and he's extending his hands, and he's saying, Mooshak, Mooshak. I had no idea what that was. And it's not for me to interpret, it's for the client to interpret. I said, would you understand that? I've never heard that word in my life. And she said to me, well, even though you're talking to me in London, I'm actually from Poland. And in Polish, buziak means kisses.
Wow.
I would not know. That's one. Another one was I was connected to this woman, and she had lost her husband. And I had brought her husband forward. She said, oh, yes, that's my husband. So then I said, okay, let me share a memory with you. And I said, he is showing me that you are camping by a little bonfire or a little fire outside. And there is like you're not in a tent, you're in like an RV, but it's not an RV park. This particular RV is like parked in a grassy area somewhere near the woods. And I said, you have these crummy lawn chairs that you're sitting on, like these aluminum lawn chairs with the webbing of the green and white webbing. And he's playing a guitar. Would you understand that? And she said, yes. And in her debrief, she told me, we live on a large property. And about 1,000 yards from the property, we have parked our RV vehicle in the grassy area. And we go there every weekend and build a fire. And she said, you would have no way. There's no way you would know that. Okay. So it doesn't end there. I connected with her husband so quickly that I said, if you have any questions that you want to ask him? And she said, well, I'd like to know if anything precipitated. We had already established that he had a heart attack. Okay. So, because I told her my sense was he had a heart attack. So she said, I want to know if anything precipitated his death. And I said, are you asking me, did someone have a hand in his death? Because I get no feeling about that whatsoever. It came across naturally. She said, well, not exactly. I said, you weren't with him when he passed? And she said, no, he was out of town and he was in a hotel. But he had my stepson, his son, with him. And this boy had a mental illness. So I said, so you're asking me, did your stepson do something that created stress for your husband that precipitated this heart attack? She said, well, it's been bothering me for the past couple of years. I always wondered. I said, okay, I'll ask him. So I asked him. I said, did he ever call you darling? She said, yes. I said, not darling, but darling. She said, yes. Here's what he said. He said, no, darling, my son had nothing to do with this. As a matter of fact, I was more concerned that he would be freaked out finding me in the morning. She said, oh, okay. And then he said something to me that I had never heard before. And, when you're dealing with something as sensitive as a lost loved one, you have to be careful and not start laughing. All right. This guy says something to me. I said, your husband had quite a sense of humor. He just said something to me that I'm going to share with you. He said, no, darling, my son had nothing to do with this. My ticker just ran out of tox. Now, I had never heard that expression before. Have you?
No, not really.
No, I've heard my heart ran out of beats, but not my ticker ran out of tox. And I called 4 cardiologists afterwards. I said, have you ever heard the expression, my ticker ran out of tox? They said, never. So that is one I could not make up. I never heard of that. Okay. So that's one example. Another one, very recently, I had this reading with a woman, and the very first thing that comes in, this random thing, before I even start connecting with spirit, I get this random thing. I said, I got an image of a vanilla box of pudding. And then I'm sitting there and I go, now I'm hearing orange. I'm confused because I know that there's such a thing as vanilla pudding, but I've never heard of orange pudding. I've heard of orange jello. Um, it makes me think of a creamsicle. Would you understand that? And she said, possibly. Deadpan face. Okay. Okay. So then I say, okay, we'll put a pin on it, put it in the parking lot. We'll come back and see if it has anything to do with anything afterwards. You know what a creamsicle is, Lawrence?
Yeah.
Okay. So we do the reading. I connect with her mother, and very clear it's her mother. And then I ask for a memory. I wasn't sure about how I was going to deal with this one, but I had to report what I got, and I thought it would still be okay. So I said, your mother in her memory said, she lied to me. I said, would you understand that? She said, yes, once in my life, and it was a big one. And she says, she said to me, my mother took every opportunity, whenever any opportunity came up, to remind me that I had lied to her every single time. And I said, well, I guess she's still doing it. So that was the memory I shared. So we finish. I give her a message. She's very happy. I think we're done. She says, just a minute, please. She leaves the screen. She goes into her kitchen. She comes back. She said, holding a box of vanilla pudding and a box of orange jello. And she said, my mother gave this to me 5 years ago. It's been in my pantry ever since. She was cleaning out her pantry when she was going to assisted living, and she gave this to me. And I said, Mom, what am I going to do with this? I don't really, and how does orange jello and vanilla pudding, they don't even go together. Her mother says, you'll figure it out. Maybe you'll mix them together and make a creamsicle. Lawrence, no way would I have.
Yeah, that's so specific.
And random, It's just so specific. And the final one that I will share with you that is probably one of the most interesting is when I was on a set with a woman. We had done a free film for somebody. She was a professional actor, and this woman was turning 50, and she wanted to do some kind of project about turning 50, that she had written this play, and I was some woman that was supposed to be aging and whatever. So the woman that was my counterpart in this, we were both like co-leads in this film. She was a professional actress. I'm an amateur, right? And she was very nice to me and being helpful because I didn't know what I was doing. I needed help. So she and I became friendly, and I liked her. She was a Black woman, maybe in her 50s, very attractive. And she and I started texting each other, where we would text each other maybe 2-3 times a year. Hey, how you doing? How's it going? Blah, blah. So when she found out and saw on LinkedIn that I was offering these mediumship readings, she said, hey, I'd like a reading. I said, sure. Now, I knew nothing about her other than that experience I had with her on the set. So I started to do a reading for her, and I got this image of a Black male between the ages of 40 and 50 in the jungle, shirtless, with a spear in his hand and some type of loincloth, looking, I don't know if there was war paint on his face or whatever it was, but I thought, I am not going to tell her this because it's going to come across racist. I mean, me seeing this Black man in a jungle. But I said, it was so clear to me, I thought, okay, how can I report this appropriately? So I said, here's the evidence. I see a man who passed between the ages of 40 and 50. He is extremely handsome, and he is totally ripped. I mean, very, very physically fit. And he is standing with such confidence. And then I feel my body doing this. And I said, and walking with such confidence, almost warrior-like. Would you understand that? She says, I have no idea who you're talking about. I said, okay, I'll go back and see if he has anything else for me. I said, he's saying something about a panther, a black panther. Would you understand that? And she says, I never had anything to do with the political group Black Panthers. I said, no, we're talking animal panther. She said, wait a minute. Are you talking about Chadwick Boseman, Wakanda Black Panther? I said, let me ask. And I look at him and I go, I think this could be him. Let me ask. Silently, I said, Chadwick Boseman. And I got the shivers all through me. I said, yes, that is who's here. And she says, I can't imagine why he's coming forward. Then she says, I knew Chad. I said, you knew Chad? She said, yes. Before he became famous and his career blew up with a Fantastic Four and Wakanda Black Panther, I used to see him at auditions all the time. He's a really nice guy, but why is he coming forward? So I said to her, well, like I told you in the beginning, I have no control over who comes forward, but I can only guarantee you that whoever does is for your greatest good. So I said, now that we've identified him, let me see if I can share a memory that only the two of you experienced. So I get an image in my mind of a stage set with two actors' chairs. And I said, he's showing me a stage set with the two actors' chairs. Would you understand that? And she said, we never did a film together. I said, okay, I'll ask for another one. So now I'm seeing them having a delightful lunch in LA, and it's in a restaurant that's outdoors, like maybe on the side where it's outdoors, or there's a glass thing overhead. I said, would you understand that? She said, you know what? Yes, we did have lunch at a restaurant in LA once. So we're done with the reading, and now she debriefs me and fills me in on the details. And she said he was a really stand-up guy, just so nice. She said once his career blew up, and then he got married, we really didn't have any connection. But in the early days, he asked me if I wanted to do a project with him. He wanted me to do a project with him. But I was involved in something else. I had a contract. I don't know why I couldn't do it. I said, he asked you to be in a project with him. She said, yes. So I said, that film set that he showed me as a memory was to jog your memory that he had asked you to be on a project with him. So that was very interesting. That, do you know who Chadwick Boseman is?
Yeah, from Black
Panther. You know he died of colon cancer in his 40s and was so well known as being a really lovely human being. So that was one of I'd never gotten any celebrities before, so that was kind of cool. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So what about pets? How did you discover that you could connect with pets as well?
Well, I was doing a psychic fair. I didn't know that I could connect with pets. And somebody said, can you connect with my deceased pet? And I said, oh, geez, I've never done that. Pets are sentient beings. I should probably be able to use the same protocol with them. But you know what? I don't feel comfortable. I'm highly ethical. So I said, I don't feel comfortable charging you to do that. And unless I practice it, know I can truly do it, then I'm going to have to pass. So I thought, this is obviously important to people. So let me go out on Facebook. And I said, anybody who has a deceased pet that you'd like me to connect to, I need to practice to find out if I can do it. First come, first serve. I'll take, a half a dozen or so of you to do it, no charge. So several friends came forward. Of the friends that came forward, two that most stick out, I was able to connect with 7 of the 8 of them. So the first one was my friend who I'd known in Ohio, and she now lives in Louisiana. And she said, I would like you to connect with my border collie, Bella. So I said, okay. Bella was black and white. And she said, that's right. I said, Bella is showing me a red ribbon and a bell around her neck. Would you understand that? She said, no, Bella never had a red ribbon and bell around her neck. I said, okay, let me go back and look for more evidence. I said, I'm getting an image of a ball of yarn. It's really odd for a dog. And she said, you know what? I think you're connected to Bella the cat. So I said, are you telling me you had a dog and a cat named Bella? And she said, well, that Bella, the cat, that was 50 years ago. Bella's been gone a long time. So I said, all right, well, let's see if it's Bella the cat. I'll go ask. So I asked if this was Bella the cat, and I said, Bella's saying something about New York. I said, because I knew she didn't have Bella when she was in Ohio, because I never remember this cat. And she said, well, it was actually Washington, D.C. That's East Coast. I'll take it. So I said, okay, let's see if Bella has anything else to say. I said, uh-oh, Bella is not happy with you. She said, why? What's up? I said, she says, you have some nerve giving a dog my name. That's what the kid said. Not happy that somebody, especially a dog, got her name. So that was one. The other one that is really very startling was one of my coach colleagues raises donkeys, and she had lost her beloved donkey, Winston, and she wanted me to connect with Winston. I know nothing about donkeys. So I said, Winston was brown. She says, no, he wasn't brown. Because all I know are mules, all right? I didn't know what I was looking at her. Okay, so I said, okay, let me go back. See, now watch my face. All of a sudden, this happens to my lip. I said, was something going on with Winston's mouth or lip, gums or something? She said, you're in the right place. You want me to tell you? I said, no, I need to give further evidence. And then I heard loud as could be in my head, tobacco. I said, he says tobacco. Would you understand that? She said, mm-hmm, I do. I said, are you telling me that Winston chewed tobacco? And she said, no, he did not chew tobacco. I said, she said, do you want me to tell you? I said, listen, you know what this means. It's up to you to interpret it. I do not interpret. He's giving me symbols. I don't know what this means. She said, Winston passed of oral cancer. Now, you know that people that chew tobacco oftentimes get oral cancer. And sometimes spirit will, they don't say, Winston doesn't say, I died of oral cancer. Go tell her that. No, he's telling me in symbols. All right. So then all of a sudden I hear 25. I said, now Winston's saying 25. Do you understand that? She said, yes, he was about 25 when he died. Now that's being followed by the number 5. She said, there were 5 donkeys in the herd. And then I gave her a memory, and then I gave her a message. And so, but that was really startling to me.
Wow.
So having gotten that, I decided, okay, I can do this. I should probably take a class in animal communication, because I was like winging it, doing what I know as a medium. Maybe there's some stuff I don't know that I can hear from a good animal communicator. So I took a course. And this one was to talk with either deceased or live animals. So she tells me, I take this course, and then I'm not doing it on live animals with anybody. I just know the protocol. And I happened to be in Chicago visiting a friend of mine, and we were at her daughter's house. And her daughter has this big black cat. The cat must be 15, 20 pounds, huge, named Mo. And Mo has a brother. And so I decided I'm going to try to see if I could talk. I don't tell anybody what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if I could talk to Mo. So I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do to connect with this cat. He sniffs my hand, and then he walks away. I go, oh, well, I guess it's not working. The next thing I know, Mo comes over to me, and he wants to jump on my lap. And in doing so, because he's so big, his leaping up to my lap is not just leaping from the ground. He's got to dig his claws into my thigh as leverage to get up there. And when he does that, I go, oh, my God. And her daughter said, oh, I'm so sorry that he put his nails in you. I said, he didn't really mean to hurt me. He was just trying to get leverage. It's okay. But she puts him down. And that's kind of the end of that for that moment. And as we were getting ready to leave, he is sitting on the kitchen counter, but his back is to me. So I'm coming up from behind him, and I'm petting him and doing all the things you're supposed to do to connect with an animal. And when a cat presents you their hindquarters, it doesn't look at you, and you just see their hindquarters. That is a symbol of trust, because otherwise they'd be checking you out. But he felt okay with me. And then he does something like this. Now I'm going to show you how it goes. So pretend this is him, and he goes. I said, Mo, you got something you want to say? And he tells me something. And I say to her daughter, Mo just said, my brother steals my food. And my friend's daughter puts her hand up to her mouth and she says, how did you know that? I said, I didn't know that. That's just what he said. He said, this has been a perpetual problem in our house for the past 6 months. The brother has been coming in and stealing his food. I have to give him a special feeder, to put him in another room, blah, 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 blah. So there you go.
That's crazy. Yeah, I'm very open-minded to all this stuff, and I could see how you can connect with humans, right? I just have a hard time understanding the pet thing. It's mind-blowing to me, like how that works. You know what I mean?
Well, it's equally as mind-blowing to me because you're thinking, well, how does a pet think like a human? But they see, they observe things, and pets show affection. They do that kind of stuff, and they're not doing math for you, but it's all I can tell you is what happened. Another interesting thing happened when I was in Chicago. This friend of mine that I was visiting, I've known since I've been 14, and I was very reluctant. She's also a coach for the Honor Foundation. And I was reluctant to do a reading for her because I knew too much about her. I knew her mother, I knew her grandparents, I know her brother and her sister. Her grandparents are gone and her mother's gone. And I loved her mother. Her mother's name was Bibi, and she was like Lucille Ball. She was a character. And I never knew her father because her father had passed before I had met her. So, and I think when I met her, her sister was maybe 6 or 7. Her brother was maybe 10, and she was 14. Okay. So I knew she wanted me to bring her father forward. So I said, I have no control who comes forward, but we'll see. So the first person who came forward was her grandma. And I felt such love that was being extended to her from her grandmother. And then I told her what I got. And then I said, I'll look for your father. And then her father came forward. And the first thing he said, I described him to her. And then the first thing I said, he says, I adored my wife. She was Bebelicious. Right? And we have this conversation and I give her some messages. And then out of the blue, he says, Cindy was a surprise. Now, Cindy was the youngest sister. I said, would you understand why he would say that? She said, well, Cindy was born after he died. I said, I didn't know that. I didn't meet Cindy until she was 6. What do I know? I didn't know that. So we determined that her mother may not have, she was only maybe 2 months pregnant at the time that her father passed, 2 to 3 months. And in those days, you could not get an instant pregnancy test. You had to wait for a full 3 months before you could get confirmation of pregnancy. So with her being concerned about his illness and her not knowing if she was pregnant and thinking maybe, I'm just so distressed over his illness, my period hasn't come and that's it, she may never have told him. So I thought that was a most interesting piece of evidence.
Wow, yeah, that's fascinating. So as we kind of close it out here, what advice would you give someone hesitant to seek a reading?
Well, first of all, make sure that you have an ethical medium that you're talking to, someone who has either been certified or you look at the reviews and somebody, with me, I most of the time I'm able to connect. If I'm not able to connect, a good medium, if they're not able to connect, they'll tell you we're not able to connect. They'll either give you a refund or they will reschedule their reading for another time because you never know what's going on why you can't connect. So I would say that you need to understand that you have to keep an open mind and that you have to understand you may not get the person that you want to come forward, but there is nothing to fear because Spirit is just sending love and they truly want to connect with you and they do it through us. And that's how that works.
Okay. Yeah. And, one of my favorite questions that I like to ask all my guests, this podcast, I'm really trying to figure out the meaning of life and reality. So, with all of your life experiences and considering your work as a medium, and I know earlier you were talking about quantum physics and stuff, right? So, what is your view now on the nature of reality and consciousness?
I think we're all connected. And I think everything is about energy. And there's a book called The Field, and we're all connected. And it's a matter of attunement, being able to. We're all operating on different frequencies, and being able to switch and shift that frequency, and being open to the fact that we are all connected, I would say.
I love that. And so, what about death? What is your view on death, and what happens when we die?
We never really die. We lose our physical body, but our spirit lives on. And that's one of the things that become very evident. Our loved ones are always around us, and they want to communicate. You just need to know how to tune in. That's really what it's about.
Okay. And so, if any of my listeners wanted to book a reading with you, how can people book a reading with you?
Yes, just go to my website, which is www.elizabeth, ELIZABETH, Fried, FRIED.com/medium. And that tells you exactly what to do.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to add that to the video description. So, last question here. Can you send the listeners out there a final message of love and healing for the ones who might be struggling out there?
Always know that your loved ones are around you and really, really love you. And they want you to know that they're there and available for support. So if you want to connect with them, seek out a reputable medium to help you get that healing or empowering message. If you need closure, if you just want to know that your loved one's okay, you'll be able to get what you need.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. Bye.